First point, if you worship the image, you receive a mark. See the relationship there? One is a reward for the other. Specifically, the mark, not the image, allows us to buy and sell, so it's clearly a financial tool. So although you would assume both are forced upon people, they are in fact not forced. Here's why. First, notice the word cause in both verses. Causes as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed, and he causes all, small and great, to receive a mark. Cause means that Satan is trying to coerce people by creating a circumstance where they cannot buy or sell if they do not take the mark. And if they cannot buy or sell, this would lead them to starve to death. See, it's in a roundabout way of killing people. They aren't going house to house with military executing people, they are causing them to die. But here's the brilliant part. They will reason that if or when these people die, it's not their fault for not giving them food. Their blood will be upon their own hands, as all they had to do was worship the image, take the mark, and buy food. In other words, their death will be deemed a suicide. Satan loves inventing loopholes to justify sin. So how on earth could something like this be enforced and implemented, where not one person could get away with buying and selling even once if they didn't have the mark? We would need the entire world dialed into a Wi-Fi system where literally every transaction is monitored and the entire population agreeing that these people cannot receive any handouts. So what is the mark? Well, here's the thing. The mark could be any financial tool. I really don't think it's worth arguing over or speculating. Why? It's simply going to be whatever the dominant financial tool is at the time this prophecy is fulfilled. This will probably shock you, but I want you to realize that it's possible that the mark in and of itself is not evil, but spiritually neutral. In the same way when Timothy said, "The love of money is the root of all evil," he was saying money itself was not evil. But if you sin to acquire it or have faith in money over God, then it's evil. Or more specifically, you don't have enough faith that God can look after you if all your money's taken from you. So you decide to worship the image in order to maintain access to your money. And how many believers today have the faith to go it entirely alone with God? This will be quite the test, one we need to take serious and ask God to teach us to develop this kind of faith in Him. See, let's say that Mark ended up being a cell phone. Right now, you aren't selling your soul in order to have one. The cell phone itself is spiritually neutral. But that could change if someday all financial transactions are done on a phone and you have to worship the image of the beast in order to maintain using yours. See how this could work? This is why I believe it's not that important to know exactly what it will be. You lose your salvation over worshiping the image of the beast. So shouldn't you be more interested in knowing what the image is? But yet almost everybody is obsessed over what the mark is and nobody seems to care what the image is. And unfortunately, that's the extent that I can help you on that topic for now, as I myself do not know what the image is. I am not satisfied with any of the interpretations out there. But in saying that, part 2 of this video will help narrow in on this as we look behind the veil behind the veil. So now let's get back to the question of how does the mark cause boils and kill the ruach in the water? The clues first started to come to me with the onset of the cell phone era, when over the last 30 years I met random people who suffered from EMF sensitivity. They were extremely rare and science couldn't figure out why it was some people and not others. But the answer did eventually come when a friend gave me a book by a Christian pastor named Dr. Henry Wright called A More Excellent Way. In this book he shares countless stories of how he cured people with all kinds of sensitivities, including EMF. What he found was a consistent common denominator for EMF and all sensitivities, which was remorse or bitterness. When Dr. Wright would help them give up their bitterness or remorse through prayer, forgiveness, and repentance, all their sensitivities would go away, and they could go back to living a normal life. His method was so successful that he carried on workshops around America, which had amazing results. See, this video is consistently about science that includes God and the Ruach that He breathed into this world. It helps us figure out what secular science cannot. Okay, so how does all of this apply to the mark of the beast and the boils? Well, what do we know about this exact time? Humanity will have just agreed that everyone who doesn't worship the image should starve to death. And it says, "They have no rest day or night, those who worship the image and take the mark." Sounds like a pretty guilty conscience to me. And suddenly, they all start breaking out in boils. And research shows that stress actually can cause boils. So I'm going to fill in the obvious blanks here, but that in order for the entire world to be monitored so that not one financial transaction slips through the cracks, the entire world would have to be fully bathed in EMF radiation. But don't forget, the EMF exposure alone is not enough to cause any sickness or boils. Why? That's right, only the marked get the boils, not the righteous. The righteous have no guilt or bitterness. And guess what that means? They forgive the whole world who wants them dead. They have no bitterness against them. Okay, but what on earth would cause the waters to die? Could it possibly be a worldwide EMF exposure? Another clue came to me 20 years ago when I ordered a book from Australia on how to make free energy out of water. I never completed this as I got weirded out when I started reading all the testimonies of people who were trying to replicate the results. There were many strange phenomena recorded, and the guy who originally came up with the idea claimed to have learnt it while in a coma from some glowing beings who taught it to him. Weird, right? It became pretty clear to me that the fuel this book was teaching you to create from water was not hydrogen or oxygen, but actually spirit, or the ruach that God breathed into our waters. In part 2 of this series, I will explain why I don't mess with alchemy, as sorcery and alchemy are actually one and the same. And since the beginning of the 1800s, Satan has systematically removed the science of alchemy from secular science, so that he can reintroduce it in the last days to deceive the whole world, just as the Bible warns us he will. This is why you will not be able to find any science or studies regarding the Ruach. Science likes to pretend it doesn't exist or have any impact on our physical world. But remember, this video is about science that includes God and the Ruach he breathed into our world. Now I believe the whole reason I wasted time with that venture was that it was one of the rare ways for me to understand what's really behind the second and third plagues. And what I learned was very intriguing. There were many testimonies of people who claimed that bringing a cell phone around the living energy cell they had created would ruin it and they would have to start all over. The water would turn rancid and people exposed to it felt extreme mood swings. So as a Christian, I decided this was not for me, while asking God to explain what was going on here. Over the years, I found more random studies or experiments gone wrong that lined up with this pattern. So if the entire world is bathed in EMF radiation, is it also possible that this could warp or kill the life in the waters? Regardless, something will kill or change the Ruach in the waters, and if it isn't EMFs, then it'll be something else. But whatever it is, it will only be understood through spiritual science, and thus difficult to prove through conventional scientific methods. This is why God will be pouring out the gift of prophecy in the last days, to bring us clarity where needed. I'll be dealing with that in another video. Now the painful irony here is that the likely reason that Satan and his followers will use to justify the mark is it will be viewed as the only way to save our environment. So the very thing they do to save the world will cause the destruction of our atmosphere. It's the same principle as, he who seeks to save his life, he will lose it. So now we've completed the section on creation, the flood, the plagues, and the mark. So now are you ready for this? I'm going to show you 3 examples in the Bible where people saw the firmament with their own eyes or in vision, and all 3 of them were well after the flood. And all their accounts are harmonious with each other. And this alone proves the firmament still exists today, and yet it's only a portion of the evidence. So about 8 years ago, I began seriously pondering this topic. I really had no one to talk to about it. Theologians and pastors didn't care, and I had no idea the Bible had so many answers. I didn't even realize the word heavens could refer to the second heaven. So I was completely lost and alone, with no one else to turn to but God. I asked God to provide me clarity, and then one morning as I woke up, my own thoughts spoke clearly to me. The answers you seek are in Revelation chapter 4.